Tonight, it is a pleasure to welcome and to introduce you to um, Dennis Fritz. And I'm looking at your military title. Um, 28 years in the Air Force, retired Commander Chief Master Sergeant. That's a lot of responsibility and a lot of teaching that I think you do with folks in the Air Force. Um, If it's okay, Dennis, I'm not going to talk about the commanders that you advised, but I think important for everybody here to recognize, I think, how much authority you had in terms of teaching and educating commanders. And now it's the Eisenhower Institute.
Eisenhower Media Network.
Thank you, because that's when we met, when we would do the lobbying to
Mhm.
Congress to try to inform them about the illegality of the Biden administration authorizing millions and millions of dollars for armaments to go to Gaza without going through the Congress. Um, and now it's just extraordinary, I think, the times that we are facing. And I also see it kind of as an opportunity for all of us to work harder and work together more. So, Dennis Fritz, welcome to Veterans for Peace and to the New York City chapter. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. And I come before you with great gratitude for having me and the gratitude I have for you all who have been doing this for many years. And so my hat's off to you. As we talk about this, I mean, we're up against, I'm gonna just single out two. We're up against two major, and I'm gonna use the term monsters, if you will, in the military industrial complex and the Zionist lobby. And we're up against a lot. But I will just say this, and Ray heard me say this this past weekend as we were able to be together for a conference in Ohio, is that this is going to probably shock you, but this is probably the most optimistic I've been. Now, where we are is just catastrophic, but this is the most optimistic I've been. Why is that, Dennis Fritz? It's because of the fact we're beginning to reach more and more people now. I won't talk about domestic politics, but never in my life would I had imagined myself lining up with Marjorie Taylor Greene, lining up with Megyn Kelly, lining up even with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. Just from a domestic politics perspective, and I'm lined up right with them and on that same train with them. Now, what do I have to offer, and why am I here? Because sometimes I feel, that when we all come together, we're really speaking to the choir because of the fact we're on the same mission. But my goal is to give you, as I tell during some of my presentations, I can give you facts, I can give you opinions, and I can give you assumptions. And so I'm going to start out by giving you some facts for you to use as I'm preaching to the choir to use to help convince others that to use their own critical thinking. In the conference I just mentioned before, and that Ray attended as well. I heard one of our colleagues. I think I'm going to start looking at that from that point of view of putting the onus back on whoever we're talking to and trying to convince. I like the way he would say, you know, if this is what you want, if this is like how you like to be remembered, and I'm going to propose from that phrase to give you all uh, some maybe talking points. So now, Susan, when you talked about how man where we are today, it's just it's just so frightening, so fearful, and so saddened because of the fact whether we like it or not, we're complicit because it is our government and we're complicit. And shame on us. And now I'm talking about us, I'm talking about in general because we're doing whatever we can. But shame on us, the American people, if we don't speak out. And we must continue to do that and to give them the tools to be able to speak out and convince those that are not speaking out and don't realize how complicit we are as a people in regards to the status of the world today. So let me just show you how I got into this. We all have our own story, how we got into this. How did we got into this fight, going all the way back to the Vietnam War and maybe even before then. I grew up in a military town. I grew up in at Fayetteville, North Carolina, Fort Bragg, home of the 82nd Airborne Division that's being deployed as we speak. And so I saw those soldiers during the Vietnam War coming back. How I had two cousins where I knew it personally, cousins and friends, but I'm going to highlight two cousins that left to go to the Vietnam War as geniuses, smart individuals, and came back as one became a drug addict, the other became an alcoholic. And I looked up to them and I couldn't understand what happened to them. And so, why do I say that? For me, it goes all the way up to the Vietnam War. And what got me into this, I look at the human cost of war. And that has been my life. Soon as you mentioned, as for those of us, we have number of services for the Navy. I was the command master chief. For the Army, I was the command sergeant major. For the Marines, I was the sergeant major. And in the Air Force, we call it the command chief. And my job was to oversee it and support, making sure they were ready for war and the training and the care of our men and women in the United States Air Force. And of course, as you saw on my resume, doing a couple of major commands, in particular Space Command, I was a joint senior leader where I had Marines, Army, and Navy, and as well as the Air Force. And then likewise in NORAD. Now, why do I share that with you? Perfectly. I was responsible for those men and women, and I had integrity in leading those men and women. And I always told them the truth. And what got me on this crusade to be a part of you in speaking up and speaking out was, like all of us, and I must be candid with you. When 9/11 hit, we all became, what I call Americans, feeling that, hey, we had to do something because we allegedly, and I'm going to use that term because you understand later, we were allegedly attacked, if you will. And and so I somewhat supported that war, but I'm here to tell you now, we'll talk about that later. That was a false war as well. It was just a war to get us ready to go into the true mission of going into Iraq, Syria, and Iran, which you've all was all seeing right now. Now, when 9/11 hit, yes, we were all Americans. We came together. President George W. Bush with the bullhorn in your area, in New York, saying they will hear us soon. But when it came time to go into Iraq, as I'm getting troops ready for deployment, I'm not understanding. Why are we going into Iraq? What did they have to do with 9/11? I couldn't see anything. Now, in my resume, we talk in bio, we talk about how I was a formal advisor to then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I reached out to him. I reached out to his staff. Why are we going to war in Iraq? The troops are asking me. They don't understand. And I had to have credibility with the troop. I didn't like the answer I got from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That is, Chief, we support our commander in chief. And when they say go to war, we go to war. Now imagine how heartbroken I was to hear a four-star general tell me that when I was not seeing no intel and his staff was telling him there was no intel about WMD. So that was the beginning of my start of this cause because I could not see sending troops off to a war that I didn't know what the mission was. I didn't know what the objective was. And when they were coming to me, I had no answer to them other than to say, well, we salute. No, I couldn't do that. So on the officer side, you can, as we wish a lot of these general officers would do, retire in protest and speak out. I retired in protest to speak out on behalf of the men and women of our armed forces. And so as I tried to speak out, nobody will listen to me. Unfortunately, nobody will listen to me. And here it was. I was out there jobless at the time with a family. And I had an old mentor of mine to come to me and say, Fritz, you're in retirement, but you need to come back to the Pentagon. Now, at the time, I did not realize what a blessing and what divine intervention that was. Because I end up, and I know most of you follow this and are historians and understand everything I'm about to tell you, but I just want to give you some talk points that I know to be factual. Little did I know I would be going to work in a project working for the number three guy in the Pentagon. That guy have to be named Doug Feith, one of the main instigators and promoters of the war in Iraq. And if you just visualize a person that we lost here last year, Daniel Ellsberg, the Pentagon Papers for the Vietnam War. Well, I became, along with four others, the Daniel Ellsberg of the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. You know, somebody saw me the other day and said, "Hey, I read your book," and he told an associate of his, "I read this guy's book. You need to read it." As you look on my show, The Deadly Betrayal, we'll talk about that in a minute, how that came about. But he said this guy was in the room. And I told him, and I think Rez heard me say this over the weekend, no, I was not in the room, but I was in the room. And what do I mean by the room? I had access to every pre-planning war document for the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. Every note that Rumsfeld wrote, every note that Paul Wolfowitz wrote, every note and piece of correspondence that Doug Feith wrote. Now, how did you get access to that? Well, one of the things I must give Donald Rumsfeld credit for it, which I was not a fan of, was that he believed in preserving historical documents. He truly believed in getting them over to the National Archives. And so he made sure every conversation that they had, every directive they gave was documented. And so after doing that, it was decided at the time, I thought, that we're going to declassify as many documents as we can because of the historical significance of the Iraq War and the controversy of the war. And so I had the keys, if you will. I had the codes, if you will, a very documentation system on up to the highest classifications you can imagine, other than the ones that talk about aliens. I didn't have those, but I have had every other that in regards to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Later, I found and realized that part of the reason that we were declassifying these documents, not for the goodness and for the people to provide information to the people through Freedom of Information Acts, I come to find out that Doug Feith was writing a book, as you heard the term cherry picking intel to go to war, he was cherry picking documents to write a book to defend the lies of the war. And that's how I got into this crusade to say, I saw the lies personally. Then I saw him lying again and then writing a book. And I said, you know what? As a good enlisted man would do, I said, I'm going to go right behind him and write my own book to tell the truth. Now, that's how I got into this crusade. And the other portion that got me into this crusade, as I mentioned before, I had worked for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I was his advisor for some 5 years. And I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina. As I mentioned, I saw the wounded soldiers coming back, not the same, from Vietnam. And I challenged General Myers, and I challenged a former boss of mine who was at the time the director of the Joint Staff, a two-star, to say, if we go to war, when the troops come back, we better take care of them. It better not be like the Vietnam War. We better take care of them. And so I got assigned to the old Walter Reed, the old Army Medical Center before they combined the two. It's now over at Bethesda, called the National Military Medical Center at Bethesda. I went over to oversee the wounded warriors for the Air Force. Later on, I became the contracted program manager for the entire Wounded Warrior program for the Pentagon. And that's not the Wounded Warrior Project, a nonprofit organization, which we shouldn't have no nonprofit organization. The government should be taking care of our returning wounded, you know, and they should not have to ask for anything. But with that said, seeing up close the human cost of the Afghanistan and Iraq wars is what got me into this. This is when I started getting passionate. And as some of you heard as an appearance I made on the Judge Napolitano show, and I think I did it with Danny Davis, you can't imagine the wounds that I saw. During the Vietnam War, some of the wounds I saw, the individuals would have been dead on the spot. But if there's any good news, they were surviving the wars. But it was going to be a tough road ahead of them. And that's what got me into this crusade of peace, 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 peace before war. Now, working in the Pentagon in that program, I realized when we talk about peace and Veterans for Peace, I must tell you, going all the way back to in the Korean War. Uh, our wars have never been about peace. They've always been about war of aggression, as we're seeing right now. Now, I want to give you some facts to share and how it all ties in to now. One, let it be no doubt in your mind. I know you know this, but I'm giving you the fact because I was in the room. I saw the paper. Let it be no doubt in your mind that whether it be in Afghanistan to pave the way to go into Iraq, then Syria, if we would have went in there, and now Iran, let it be no doubt in your mind that the war was on behalf of Israel. I wrote that book 10 years ago, and everything that I wrote in that book, it was published in 2024, is coming to fruition right now. When I used to tell friends this war was about Israel, I didn't even understand that, to be honest with you. Some of you probably have known this all along. I couldn't understand why we were going into war in Iraq. But when I started reading that the war was about, on official documents, was about Israel, I was alarmed. I was in shock. And when I would tell friends about that, they didn't believe me. They thought it was about oil. They thought it was about uh, uh, George W. Bush getting revenge for his daddy Bush. They tried to kill my daddy. You know, we thought it was just so many things. It was about imperialism. But the primary reason was going to war was in support of Israel. Well, what do you mean by that, Dennis Fritz? Well, we're seeing it played out today. As you look at the Gulf nations right now, the one that allegedly we're supposed to be defending, which they're seeing now, we're not going to defend them. We'll defend Israel, but we're not going to defend them as they see now. Well, the plan was laid out that we were going to go after Iraq first. Now, why Iraq first? Because it was a regime change policy that was done by the Clinton administration to say, hey, we're going to have regime change policy. When the Bush administration came in, they were upset. Hey, it was a policy. Why didn't we take Saddam out? Well, there was no reason to take him out. We just couldn't go in and say, hey, we're going to go, as we talk about it now, regime change. That was something new. We're not going to go in and change the regimes militarily. We had done in the past through CIA and coups, but going in with the military, we couldn't justify it to the American people. Well, this is how Afghanistan and the Taliban comes into play. During that time before 9/11, the Bush administration came in January. As soon as the administration started in January 2001, we're going to find a reason to attack Saddam. Now, why Saddam in Iraq, Assad in Syria, who's now gone, and the Ayatollah, who's now gone? All that was planned. Why them? Well, because of the fact they were literally doing the humane thing that we should have been doing. They were protecting the Palestinians. And Israelis didn't like that. Saddam was protecting them, Iran was protecting them, and so Syria was providing support. And that was the sole reason for wanting to take down Saddam first, Assad second, and the Ayatollah third. But to start it, we had to have a reason other than that. It had to be about the defense of our nation, something that they thought the American people would support. And they could not find no reason to go in. Imagine this, if you will. They were even hoping, for somebody that may have followed this, we have what's called Northern Watch and Southern Watch after the first attack on Iraq in support of Kuwait. After that was over, we protected the Kurds in the north and the Shia in the south. And so we will not allow Saddam to fly any of his helicopters. And so we wanted to go to war so bad. I use we because we're all complicit. We wanted to go to war so bad, we even thought about, I'm talking about the Bush administration, thought about shooting down one of our own aircraft and blame it on Saddam. That's how bad they wanted to go to war. But they couldn't do that. And then all of a sudden, what happens? 9/11 happens. It gave them the excuse, the beginning of what we call the war on terror. The excuse, there was a regime change policy in Iraq. We had not executed it. Now was the time. You all heard it yourself when Bush was talking about weapons of mass destruction could come over here. We could see a mushroom cloud over the Capitol, if you will. They wanted to scare the American people so that we will support them going into Iraq. Now, before we did that, though, because of the fact we blame Al Qaeda. Well, we wanted them, the Taliban, to give up Al Qaeda. So since they wouldn't do that, okay, now we're going to start the war on terror. We're going to go in because we have the support and the world to go into Afghanistan to seek our so-called revenge for 9/11. And so that's why we went into uh, Afghanistan to so-called fight the Taliban because they would not give up uh, bin Laden. That's why we went in there. As you know, there was no reason for those of us in the military. We had no reason to go in there with a full army, if you will. We could have got, if we really truly wanted bin Laden, we could have got him through special operations, the CIA, which and finally we did. And guess what? As you know, he wasn't in Afghanistan. He was in Pakistan. But that gave us a justification to set the stage to go into the true mission after we went in to Afghanistan on a false pretense to get bin Laden. And you'll look at the book, it'll say, and I'm quoting Bush, he was asked a question after we couldn't find bin Laden. Well, are you upset we couldn't find bin Laden? No, I don't care about bin Laden anymore. Wait a minute. That's why we allegedly went into Afghanistan. The reason he didn't care, because we wanted Iraq, Syria, and Iran. So we went into Iraq. Now, my crusade became stronger. Why? Because 4,500, over 4,500 men and women of our armed forces were killed, and hundreds of thousands of Iraqis were killed based on a lie. Not for the defense of our country, not for peaceful means, veterans for peace, but based on a lie on behalf of Israel. We use our men and women as pawns on behalf of Israel to take out Saddam. And let it be no doubt in your mind that we were going into Syria next if it was not for the insurgency. Next, Syria. Well, we knew we couldn't go to war in Syria, so guess what we were going to do? We were going to hire, and I really mean that, provide the funding for ISIS. Think about that now. We were funding ISIS, and more importantly, Al Qaeda, to go in there and provide war and unrest in Syria. And all you have to do is do your own critical thinking as you tell your audience, because guess what? Now we have a former Al Qaeda leader running Syria, and we have him in our pockets. We invited an Al Qaeda member to the White House, the so-called sworn enemy. But no, was not our sworn enemy, was there to do our bidding, take out Assad. And then what was next? Here comes Iran. All predicted, nothing, as folks would tell me I predicted. No, I didn't predict it. I saw it. We saved Iran for last, and you must understand this. Bibi Netanyahu, when we started this, and when I say started in 2003, he always wanted us to take out Iran first. He saw that as his biggest threat to take over the Middle East. But we wouldn't do it because we had to have a plan that the American people would support. That's why we picked the numbers that we did. Iraq first because we had a regime change policy under the Clinton administration. 9/11 happened. We couldn't allow, as you heard in your own ear, with your own ears, another terrorist attack on our land. Think about that for a moment. The plan was because of the fact that we felt that we could not fight a war with Iran because it would be catastrophic. Boy, it wouldn't have been nice if a guy by the name of Donald Trump had listened to that. Why we would not fight a war with Iran was because of the fact we were afraid of the ballistic missiles. We knew they had them. We knew they were powerful, and we knew they were accurate. And so that's why the Bush administration will not go after Iran. And oh, by the way, we knew about some famous strait that could be blocked as well. So that's why we didn't do it. So what we were going to do, which you saw played out, we were going to cause unrest in Iran. And you saw it yourselves played out, predicted, written in deadly betrayal. Now, I originally thought it was the 2009 unrest that happened in Iran, but that was not instigated by us. That was actually done by the Iranian people because they had a presidential election, and two of the candidates felt that there were some dishonest things that were going on in the election. So they're the ones that really actually caused the unrest, not us, not the CIA, not Mossad. But the neocons, a word we know so well, were pushing Obama to go into Syria. That's our chance. We got the unrest we were hoping for, and to go in and support them. But Obama wouldn't do it. And in fact, he said, no, I'm not going to do it. And I'm sure y'all remember this. I'm not going to do it unless my red line is going to be if chemical weapons are introduced. And guess what? No sooner than he said that chemical weapons were introduced. And I'll just sit here and say, can you imagine who probably did that? You ever heard of a false flag? No doubt in my mind, Israel's behind that. So that was their opportunity to take out Syria. But Obama didn't take the bait. Believe it or not, look what we're seeing now when we're begging Congress to do. Obama asked them, hey, well, I'm not going to do this, but if I get congressional authorization to do this, and you're not going to blame me, it's going to be us, the people. You're going to go back and tell your people we're going into war with Syria now. Guess what? There was no congressional authorization. That's why we didn't go into Syria. So now we were going to try the unrest in Iran. This time, what we saw before us, it was absolutely orchestrated by us, Mossad, and support from the Britons. We orchestrated that, provided weapons for that. Dennis Fritz, how do you know? I saw the playbook. And what you must understand, this playbook goes all the way back to 1992. What? That's how long they've been planning this. A guy by the name of Paul Wolfowitz had planned this since 1992. He was an assistant secretary of defense back then, and we had what's called the Defense Planning Guidance, the TPG. At the time, Dick Cheney was the Secretary of Defense, and Colin Powell was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And when we went in to free Kuwait from Iraq, that's when Paul Wolfowitz, 1990, thought, oh, this is my chance. This is our chance. Let's go in and let's keep it moving. Let's take out Saddam and let's keep moving. But of all people to say no, it was one Dick Cheney. We had a mission to free Kuwait, and we're going to come back home. Paul Wolfowitz never forgot that. So he and other neocons went and camped out at the AEI, the American Enterprise Institute. They camped out there until they got the president they wanted. And once they got the president they wanted, away with the plan. Most of the cabinet members, and particularly in the office of the Pentagon, came from the American Enterprise Institute think tank. And they were able to put together their plan, leading us up to what we're going through right now. Now, as I stated before, they couldn't bait Obama, but they finally got the president they wanted. A person that owed the Zionist billionaires. You remember the first time he ran and said, hey, I can fund it myself. I got the money. I don't need anybody. In fact, he went before the Zionist lobby, which they said he was anti-Semitic when he said, hey, I don't need your money. But he was telling the truth. But anyway, he came back this second round and he said, you know what? I will take that money. And oh, by the way, I will fulfill your dreams. I will go to war with Iran. I will get rid of their so-called nuclear weapons systems if they have them, which we know they don't have. And so that's how we got to here from all the way to 1990, 1992, when Paul Wolfowitz, as the Assistant Secretary of Defense, didn't get the chance to implement the major plan. But guess what? As I mentioned, AEI, when they all came in with the George W. Bush administration plan in hand, Paul Wolfowitz got his chance. He became the number 2 guy in the Pentagon. And away we went to Iraq, Syria, and now Iran. That is how I got into this crusade. When I saw that our government was lying to the American people and the world about these wars on the backs of our men and women, veterans for peace, that's when I said I had to join the family of the Veterans for Peace and others, because we must do everything that we can to stop these ill-advised, forever lying, deadly on the back of our men and women wars that our country is orchestrating. You know, when you talk about Iran, and I'm going to share for a few minutes to let y'all ask any questions you may have of me, but I will share with this as I shared with a group this past weekend. I am probably of five people, I feel real confident to probably have seen every pre-planning document that led us to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars and now the Iranian war. So whatever questions I may be able to answer, I will do that. But I just want to let you know that, you know, when we look at what's happened today, Susan, as she mentioned, you know, what's going on in the world, sadly, we're the cause of it. If you look at Iran right now, they're more humane than we are. Their sole reason for arming, if you will, Hamas and Hezbollah was for their protection, for their defense, to protect the Palestinians. It is the Israelis that's doing the killing, and we're complicit. We're providing the funds. So I want to get rid of a couple of misnomers here that the pundits use. One, they get on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox and say the Iranians have blood, American blood, on their hands. Well, wait a minute. How? They didn't attack us. They didn't attack us over here. They attacked some of our bases after we attacked them. Well, they provided the Iraqis improvised explosive devices. Well, guess why they provided them that? They provided it so they could protect themselves, so they can defend themselves. Israel, you have a right to defend yourself. Well, does anybody else have a right to defend themselves? But guess what? We can't allow them to use that, because if you want to play that game, we have blood on our hands. We have more Arab blood on our hands than anybody in this world. Why? Because we have provided Israel with all the technology, all the bombs, all the weapon systems to kill people, to kill innocent people. So if they want to play that game, we need to be honest and let them know we're the most complicit nation on earth right now. We are. The American people. We are complicit. And if we don't continue to speak up, speak out, provide intervention, then shame on us. So let me just say, before I open up for any questions, I'm so proud of each and every one of you, because you're speaking up, you're speaking out. We could be enjoying retirement and loving life, but we can't do that because we want to be the protectors of the world. We want to stop our country from being complicit. We have the potential to be the greatest country because most of us as people, we love people. We are humane. When I was mentioned about one of our colleagues, we got to ask our folks, do you want to be known and complicit in killing innocent women and children? If you do, okay, hey, you don't need to listen to me no more. But if you don't, you need to join us in speaking out because we are killing innocent women and children through a proxy, through a country by the name of Israel. So I will leave it at that. I thank you for having me. I come before you with such, Susan, such gratitude. What a great word. It's gratifying of me to see you and how hard each and every one of you are fighting. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I'm going to ask people to raise their, yes, thank you, to raise their hands. Are there questions? Did you want to say something, Anthony?
I see Anthony there.
Yeah, thank you. I have your book, which I got 2 years ago when you came in the city, and thank you very much for the talk you just gave us. It's you always come from the heart. You're so sincere, and I read your book that that week that you presented it to
Wow.
us. Um, it is great, and I underlined everything, but I can't remember everything now. I do you have the thing about Paul Wutzowitz in 1992. forming Mossad. Tonight you mentioned talking about forming Mossad cells in Iran. I was very concerned about Iran when I met you. I spoke to Matt Ho, who was there, about it. I was very concerned that we were still planning an invasion of Iran. And but is that in your book that talking about Wolfowitz and cells of Mossad? Because I think that's what happened in January. We saw that. So
Yeah, I did not go into detail as mentioned, and Anthony, as you will see, and for those who have not, seen the book or read it,
that's
one
great.
thing you will notice about the book, a lot of redactions.
Yeah,
Redactions meaning blacked out.
yeah,
Even
yeah,
though it was unclassified, because remember, I was part of the classification team, but look at that.
yeah,
And so that's why, Anthony, I worked around it. If you look at page, I think 58 and 59, that's when I talk about how they were planning to destabilize Iran. That was as much I could say about it. But those were the sources which we saw now that were being used. You follow what I'm saying? So
yeah.
I was able to stabilize. So that stabilization was Mossad. And let me just tell you, like I said, Wolfowitz had been planning this since 1990, but he authored the defense planning guidance in 1992, and that was the game plan. And let me say, they're forward thinking, they're long range thinking. Did you hear what I say? 1990, they were planning this, and so they were looking. Now, all you got to do remember this. Just think about Bibi Netanyahu. How often y'all heard him saying, going back decades, Iran is 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon. Think about that. I always tell audiences, use your own critical thinking. How many lies have he told you? Now, here's what I tell audiences, and I really mean it from my heart. And Anthony, this is in the book. It will be prudent for now Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. Just take a look at North Korea, if you will. We talk bad about them, but we're not talking about attacking North Korea. So it'll be prudent. And another thing I tell audiences, and we just look at ourselves in the mirror. I love my United States of America. I can't think of no other place I would want to live. However, that's what makes me fight so hard. I truly want to make us a better America. Now, why do I say that? Here it is, we talk about not allowing, who are we? Say we're not going to allow them. I wish we had no nuclear weapons, but we're not allowing Iran to have nuclear weapons. But as all of you know and you've heard, but Israel, but us. And we're the only country to use such a weapon an atomic weapon. Just ask Japan, as I tell folks. And so it will be prudent on their part now. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do eventually develop a nuclear weapon. But now they may not, because as we've learned, the reason they didn't want to develop a nuclear weapon is because of the fact they knew that their ballistic missiles will be their defense. And now that's why the Trump administration also broke the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal, because the neocons at the time when Obama was working this and his team, John Kerry, the neocons and Bibi Netanyahu wanted the ballistic missiles included in the nuclear weapons program. Now, how dumb, and I ask audiences of this, how dumb would that be for them to let go of their nuclear weapons? They need to defend themselves as well. So they would never, and that's in the book, they would never let those ballistic missiles go, as we now see, because that is what's working for them. That's why, as Trump keeps saying, oh, they're begging to come to the table. No, it is us trying to push them to the table. But at the same time, we want to push them that we get everything we want. And that's not going to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions for Dennis? Tarek, yeah, Tarek, go ahead. We can't hear you.
You're muted, brother.
Okay, got it.
I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
Dennis, thank you so much. I love what you say, and I love the passion and the passion that you say it with, and the conviction that you say it with. It is so important, and we're working now to try and get as much word as we can out to active duty military. They need to hear some of what you have to say, and they need it seriously. What's your feeling about that? About the resistance from the ranks, up from the ranks? Active duty enlisted people and officers resisting these illegal wars and resisting these illegal orders. What's your feeling about all that?
Okay. Hey, let me share this with you first before we get to the active duty. For the last, and I wrote it down, for the last 20 years, after I learned what I know now, I never, and I went on public saying this, and there's others that said it too. I never talked any young man or woman to go into the military. We veterans at one time used to be the biggest recruiters, of the military, if you will. But I never, because of after I saw we were being used as pawns in these foreign wars, I had friends who were upset at me because I wouldn't talk their son and daughter into going in the military. I wouldn't do it because I didn't want them to be pawns, to be used as pawns. Now, going back to your question, you know, the good thing about now and today, when I said the troops were coming to me about the Iraq war, and I felt so bad because I had no answer for them, knowing, or at least thinking at the time, I didn't know what I know now, that this was a war of choice at the time, the Iraq war. But they had an idea from family and friends. But today, thank goodness for social media. They do get a chance to hear me, like speak out. Like when I go on the judge, show to speak out because they have Armed Forces Radio Network, they have social media, they have their phones, they have their laptops, and so they can hear. And my goal is to make them think. That's right. They have to make their own decision. But my goal is to let them know these are wars that are on choice on your backs, not in defense. Let me just tell you something. Another thing now, Terry, in defense of them, we in the military, we all went through it. When we first went into the military, we were brainwashed. That's why they sent us to basic military training, to brainwash us. You had to follow the orders of your commanders on the enlisted side of the house. The commander-in-chief, salute. Even though they teach us about the law of armed conflict and the Geneva Conventions, not to disobey an unlawful order, but we're brainwashed to believe in our commanders and the so-called commander-in-chief. And then when people say that, well, you should have known better. Well, remember I said, we got to start making people feel guilty. We're preaching to the choir. We got to go out there and talk to those people that are not the believers yet. I tell them, well, guess what? You're brainwashed. Well, what do you mean by that? Oh, man, I'm just, I think about, all the time I spent in the service. I spent my 20 years. Oh, thank you for your service. I mean, we all are guilty of saying that, but that's a brainwashing mechanism to make us feel like your service is so honorable. You make the American people feel obligated that I have to say, thank you for your service. I got to be honest with you. I know maybe us from the veteran community, I think we mean it when we say it to one another, but all the American people, they don't know what that means. Tell you, just try it. If you tell somebody I was in the service, oh, thank you for your service. I go in the restaurant sometime and say, hey, do you have a military discount? It happened to me today. Oh, no, but thank you for your service. They're brainwashed too. Why is that? Why are they brainwashing the American public to say thank you for your service? That's to be able to justify the war. Now think about how the administration used this, how the Bush administration used it, and now the Trump administration used it. Well, we're in this war now. You have to stand behind your troops. Think about that. They brainwash us, the military, feel that we're defending our country. So my job is to get the message out. No, they're lying. They're lying. We're the bad guys, unfortunately, when it comes to attacking other countries. What country has Iran attacked? I tell the young folks, anybody else, that you know of, when they said they have blood, American blood on their hands? What country? Think about the number of countries that we've attacked. And I tell them, what is our cause? I say it goes all the way back to 1935, I believe. General Smedley Butler, war is a racket. He was the first to tell us these wars are not about the defense of our country. They're about overthrowing. It's about stealing their resources. The one thing that those that support Trump hate is that he speaks the quiet part out loud. Hey, I told y'all we were going in to get the drugs out of Venezuela, but no, we're going to take the oil. Think about how much money we're going to get from the oil in Venezuela. Likewise in Iran. You know what? I'm a businessman, not in defense of our country. How about we open up the Strait of Hormuz and then Iran and I will share. We'll make a whole bunch of money. Well, when I tell the people to make them think on their own, well, wait a minute. Are you going to get any of that money? No, the oil company's going to get that money. Or how about when they say the military industrial complex, we're going to give all this weapon system money to Israel and every other country, but it's going to come back to us because they have to buy the weapon systems from who? Oh, the military industrial complex. How much money of that did you get, John, Jim, Joe? How much money of that did you get? Oh, you don't know. How much of that oil money you going to get that Trump is talking about, oh, we're going to make a lot of money? The oil companies and magnets will. I say, look up, see how much money the military industrial complex, their CEOs make. See how much money they're making. And guess what? It's a Ponzi scheme. They're taking our tax money, so-called giving it to another country, so they can buy weapons from our military industrial complex to make them rich and then to kill people. So guess what? All that money is coming from you to enrich the military industrial complex. All you got to do is look at yourself. How much of that money did you get?
Thank you, Dennis. And I would also take us back to the 1700s and think about the white colonialists that came to this country and tried to wipe out an indigenous population. We have this long history, and we need to understand the very basis of what started and why we continue this destruction of indigenous people, and we go to people of color and we continue our destruction. So I would say we look at absolutely the profits and the military industrial complex and what we are doing today, and we recognize that we really do all have that responsibility to stop what is going on, this madness that is going on.
Hey, Susan,
And it's
can I
all
make
of us working together. Yeah.
right? I'm glad you said that's what I'm going to mention. I want to thank you all. I think nationally, y'all are putting up billboards, right, around military
Yes.
installations. I think we're going to do the same. I brought that up about us doing the same and mimicking that. And Ray gave y'all a thumbs up and also and say, hey, it's really working. And so we're going to try to duplicate that as well. And maybe I'll get some folks to coordinate with y'all national because of the fact so we can put them in different places. Because the key is not our Congress, because our Congress is complicit. We need to get it out to the people who vote for Congress. So that's what we need to concentrate our efforts on too. Not Congress, because they're bought and paid for. Even though, as I said, I think we're making some progress. Y'all in New York, but I never thought I'd imagine one of the biggest takers of the APAC money is Cory Booker, and he's now saying, hey, I'm not going to take any money from APAC. So I tell the people of New Jersey, you have to hold them accountable. So we're making progress there, but it's going to be the billboards to the troops and to the people. And back to your question, I think whoever asked about the troops, I have to give them information. You have to give them, hey, that these wars are based on lies, not in the interest of our company. And then they have to make that decision themselves on whether or not they're going to follow orders. But to add to that, I don't blame the enlisted troops as much as I blame the 4-star generals and the 4-star admirals who know better. And I'm going to, as we talked this past week, I'm going to start challenging them to include my former boss. You know, I go at him all the time. As you'll look in the book, and he got a copy of the book. He even wrote an excerpt in the book. And I told him I wish he would have told Rumsfeld, well, first slap him first, and then told him to take this job and shove it. You know, I told him that personally, and I'm going to get on him. He's going to be the first person that I'm going to get on about these 4-star generals not speaking out or not retiring. Or when they do retire, then they go quiet. Like the chief of staff of the Army, they need to speak out.
Thank you. And I would just say those signs are also geared towards all of us. Yes, Jane, go ahead. Can't hear you.
You got to unmute, Jane.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for this discussion. You know, I agree that we are in these wars to promote Zionist Israel, but why? Why did we go this way? Why are we, backing Zionist Israel?
Well, I don't know if that's a question, but it goes back a long way. You know, I guess probably the easiest one to talk about is 1917, the Balfour Declaration by the Rothschilds with the minister, the foreign minister in England, where the so-called uh, converted Jews out of Europe wanted the so-called homeland. And so when, that goes all the way back to 1917. And then in 1948, when Israel declared themselves a state, we were the second country, I can't remember the first, to recognize them as a state. And you got to understand, the Zionists are very, what do we like? They're very smart. They've been working. Remember, I said the 1992 how taking out Iran, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. But they've been planning to take over the Middle East for decades. And so we, along with money, and that's when they bought out our Congress. We tell folks, oh, our Congress is occupied, not militarily, but financially. And so we got to break that. Why, as all of you know, I hate to repeat something when I say I'm speaking to the choir, but why is not Israel a foreign agent? All those folks at AIPAC, why aren't they part of the foreign agents? Every country is. No other country could get away with what Israel is doing. The bottom line, the root of all evil, money. And our Congress is bought and paid for. Until we break that, that's when you can get rid of the why. And that's why I say we got to hold Cory Booker accountable when he says he's no longer going to accept, AIPAC money. And we got to make sure all the other congressional members, and we got to ask them that question. If I go to in my district, if I'm going to anything, political candidates, I'm going to say, hey, are you accepting money from AIPAC? Let me see the books. So that is why, ma'am, unfortunately, it's money and power. People want to feel good. I'm a member of Congress, but they're taking their money from evil.
And I would suggest we go back even further if we want to go back to the Second World War and the fact that no country would take the Jews that were trying to escape from Europe and trying to escape the Nazi Holocaust. But the British formed the land in Palestine, and they were colonists way before the Israelis were there. I just think it's important for us again, and I keep going, we talk about this all the time, to look at history. Where did this start? What keeps this going on, and where can we interfere and we can begin to stop it? We've got to understand history. I think we all know Americans are very short-sighted. So let's go back and take a look. Let's go back and take a look at what happened to the indigenous population in this country and how this has continued and how it continues.
Hey, Ellen has her hand up.
Oh, Ellen.
A plane soon. So, Ellen.
If it is, it's an accident. Sorry. I'm about to board, so.
Oh.
Okay. Well, listen, why are you doing it if nobody asks a question? Susan, you just mentioned something else, too. When I say we have to counter the pundits, when they say, when they talk about all Arabs and those from Islam, they hate us. No, they don't hate us. We cause them to hate us. When you talk about history, when the pundits saying, about how bad, the Iranians are, well, they should hate us when you talk about history. Democratic elected government. We overthrew that government in 1953. We, the United States of America, along with Britain. You know why? Smedley Butler for all. BP. And so when you talk about history, and specifically now when we talk about Iran, we started this. They say this started in 1979. No, they took their government back from us in 1979, from which we took from them in 1953 in a coup.
Me too. I'm not quite sure. I don't think I have Messenger.
Did somebody have? Rachel, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I have deepest apologies to Anthony. Well, when I tried to remove his pin, instead I removed him from this Zoom, and I invited him 4 times, but he cannot come in. So instead, he sent to me a question to ask Dennis again. And after this, I have my own question. So please bear with me. First, this is a question from Anthony. Sorry. Dennis, do you think Israel will use the nuclear option? And he is expecting another false flag event by US or Israel
for they really want Iran out now? What do you think?
I'm asked that question often, so I'm gonna give you two answers here. The first is, do we think the U.S. would use a nuclear weapon? Which I feel, when I talk about give you facts, which I gave you earlier, I give you assumption and opinions. This is an assumption and opinion. I don't think the U.S. will use a nuclear weapon. This is the one time when I truly have the faith in our general officers that I don't think they would do that. Okay, because if they did that, I think that opened the eyes of China and also of Russia. And there have been countries already say that they may come in nuclear, in particular Pakistan, if we have to do that. Now, when it comes to Israel, if they truly have nuclear weapons, I think they could if they saw an end to Israel. Now, and I'm a little more, cautious on that one because of the fact I truly feel, just from what I saw when I was in the Pentagon, and as folks say I predicted, no, I didn't predict it, I saw it, the ballistic missiles that Iran have, uh, I think if they wanted to, they being Iran, they can destroy Israel. And I've heard it from a number of sources. They can destroy Israel, make it unlivable, if you will. They've shown they can do that because the ballistic missiles are powerful. If it came to that where Iran said, okay, enough is enough, we're going all out, I think that Israel will possibly use a nuclear weapon then if they have it. Now, you hear me say if they have it. The experts say they have it. I'll leave it up to Ray and others, Johnson, to say they have them. That's why I give opinions back. I don't know if they have them. I never saw anything. What I saw in the Pentagon, it was always rumored they have them, but I don't know. So if they have them, if it came to Iran destroying them with the ballistic missiles, I think as a last push, they will use it. So, yeah. So I don't think America would, but I think Israel possibly would.
Thank you so much for explanation. And I would like to say thank you on behalf of Anthony. So can I go on to my questions? It is something
Go ahead,
related
Rachel.
to the current issue. Well, there is an Israeli company called Magna BSP. This is an Israeli military contractor, and it has Japan's branch, Magna BSP Japan. This particular company deals with the security of nuclear power plants in Japan. When it comes to Fukushima Daiichi, the big earthquake occurred in 2011, and Magna BSP Japan got the contract to deal with its security a year before, 2010, okay? And please, I'd like to focus on the fact that Japan is the world fifth largest plutonium stockpile country, okay? Do you think, is there any relation between Israelis manufacturing nuclear weapons with Japan's plutonium? What do you think? Is it too wild imagination? Or do you think any reasonable possibility here? What do you think?
You ready for this? Opinions, assumptions, and facts. I can't give you an assumption or an opinion. I honestly don't know. That's something I've never really looked into, and you just ask, ask me something I don't know. But what I'm going to do with that, there are people that I run with in slang talk, hanging out with, and that I'm going to bring that to their attention, and maybe Ray can share it with you all, one day. But I don't know the answer. I don't have no opinion or assumption, on that. But it's nothing I've never really looked into or was aware of. But you just brought it to my attention.
Thank you very much. And my last question, can I ask you another one? This is my last. Okay. So I've been going to Japan the last 10 years, except for the time during the pandemic. But starting from 2023, we started to visit remote islands off the coast of Okinawa, between Taiwan and Okinawa Island. And those islands are massively militarized right now. As you might know, Okinawans, let's see, U.S. military bases in Okinawa has been returning their property back to Japan or to Okinawa, but simultaneously, self-defense forces of Japan has been building massive garrisons and related facilities in those small islands. Now, I just spoke with the guy who lives in Ishigaki Island yesterday. He told me that there are a lot of joint military exercising going on those islands. So although the military facilities belong to Japan, a bunch of U.S. military men are coming to those islands and practicing. Okay, so as a result, for the residents, this is not reduction of military forces, but actually expanding all the way through the off the coast of Yonaguni, which is the closest island of Taiwan. So when you were in the office, did you see this developing plan for military power encroaching Japan and Okinawa and then small islands when you were in service? Did you see any documents related to this?
No, but let me just share some gee whiz stuff. Okay. As been a military brat, I was born on Okinawa. And then the other part of that is that in fact, I'm planning on a visit. My son was born in the Philippines when I was stationed there, so we're going to do that visit next year, Okinawa in the Philippines, so forth. But with that said, when I was on active duty, that was my area of responsibility. I was the command chief of Pacific Air Forces. And what I will tell you, yeah, those, as much as I can say, those exercises are taking place. It is done because, as going back and forth to Okinawa, the citizens there's always been a push to get the military out of there, especially the U.S., whether it be because our drunken Marines raping women, our drunken, soldiers and airmen, and then also just militarism of us being there. And so to offset that, to hide it, allegedly, the so-called hide it from the citizenry, the people, they started going out to these off islands to do the exercising, the drills, if you will, because of the fact now Japan does, believe it or not, have a fear of China, even have a fear of North Korea, and so we're going to still continue to do those joint exercises, and it's to be out of the view of the public, if you will, who the people of Okinawa, they resent the Americans from being there. So if that answers your question, yeah, I mean, those exercises are going on. They're going to go on. And, the Japanese Defense Force, they do support that too, because they see it as defense for them, unfortunately.
Thank you. We have a question. John, did you want to ask a question? And welcome.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, I do want to ask a question. Also, I want to say a very interesting discussion. And I'm encouraged by what Tarek and some of the others have said about how the veterans are very much interested in reaching out to the active duty GIs, which is something that I always think is important to do. And I would, especially if this military adventure that started, I don't know if you say it started, but which has got expanded greatly with the attack on Iran, continues to expand, and doesn't just somehow come to a halt because Trump makes an announcement that the U.S. has won and now we can just get out, because things don't often happen that way in imperialist adventures. And what I wanted to know, maybe, I don't know if Dennis, how much direct contact he has these days, but there were things I wanted to know, maybe he heard about or he saw this in the planning. I saw that in the last week, the government has begun a process of automatically registering the young people for the draft, which I think they did before, like in around 2006 when it was hard to recruit. But it seemed ominous, particularly ominous that it happened this week, that the announcement was made, because it makes an impression on you that it happens at this time. Instead of requiring young people from 18 to 26 to register, they automatically register because that information's out there. So that means, to me, it means, oh, maybe they're planning to reinstate the draft. Is there any talk about that? The other, or did you see any papers that said that was part of the plans? The other is some things that happened on the USS Gerald Ford with the burning that took place. There was either an accidental fire or there was a missile hit it or something happened that made a rather large fire. It destroyed 100 bunks and beds for 600 people or something like that. And now the fort, I think, is still being repaired in the docks. But they had the fort in Suda in Crete, in Greece. And but the fort had been in service, had been in active duty for 10 months, which I read was not usual. Usually 6 months is the most that you're at sea. And I think the sailors, they must be working 80 hours weeks for 10. I mean, how long can you do that? I mean, more than in any other service, the Navy is like a big factory. And
thank you, John. I think your question is right.
Okay.
One is what was going on with the fort, and I think what you saw in terms of little acts of sabotage is exactly what went on during Vietnam and Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
It's kind of a starting with the latrines and fires. And go ahead, Dennis.
No, I was gonna say, opinion, assumptions, and facts. I saw Ray smiling, because we discussed that over the weekend. I will tell you, I have talked to some folks, and I talked to a person last week, a former Marine that had contact with the Navy, in the ships, and he assured me. So I directed to a member of the press who was asking me that. I don't like to give answers if I don't know it to be factual, but he assured me it is sabotage. Okay, it's not covered. I'm here, from sources, so it is sabotage. And when you talk about the fourth, it'll probably be the longest deployment ever. And so I'm hearing sabotage. I don't know that to be factual, but the way they describe it, I believe it. Okay, I'll just say it that. So I'm giving an assumption from people that I've heard who say they know it to be factual, but I'm secondhand. So, but I am hearing, and every time I hear somebody talk about it, they say sabotage. Okay, so that's what I will tell you. The most critical question too that you just asked is about a draft. Yeah, that took place. I think it's going to take effect actually in December when they automatically start doing it. Yes. But here's what I would share with you: two things that come to mind when people are worried about are they going to introduce ground troops, in Iran. As I tell people, do your own critical thinking. Think about this for a moment. The Taliban, a third world country, where we went into war and they only had maybe rifles and improvised explosives and so forth. How long we were there, and guess who's still in charge? The Taliban. You think about Iraq, it was an insurgency, not a bona fide, well-equipped military. We're out of there. Our embassy is no longer there right now. It's been not destroyed, but it was attacked, and all personnel were asked to leave. So think about if we put ground troops in Iran, a larger country, a more sophisticated and well-armed country. It will be catastrophic. You're talking about the troops right now. At any given time, the highest peak, I think we had 180 troops in Iraq. We're nowhere near there right now. So if Iran, which I feel confident, start eating our troops alive, we put them in there, some people start thinking, whoa, that's why they did that automatic, not reenlistment, but automatic
elective
draft.
Service, right?
Yeah, elective service, yes. That's why they automatically did that, some people think. But now, here's what I would tell you, John. I don't think that would happen. First of all, to take congressional approval to do that. And I don't think they'll vote for that. But here's what's going to happen, like what happened in Iraq. It will be a backdoor draft. Now, what do I mean by that? During the Iraq war, because you think about it, I say we had 180 troops in Iraq, and that wasn't enough. So what we did, those that were on active duty, when their enlistments were up, hey, I did my 4 years, I'm out of here. The government will not allow them to get out. They extended their enlistment, backdoor draft. Also, the Guard and Reserve. That was probably some of the longest deployments of any of them. They extended their duties. Normally you go in and backfill and do your thing and then come back to your civilian job. Some of them lost their civilian jobs because they were gone so long because we extended their duty for backdoor draft. So I see that's what's happening, is that if it came to us going war on the ground with Iran, I'm not fearful of a draft, but if the war continued, we would need one. But I think that'll be the time when everybody stand up because of the fact they don't want to see their sons and daughters going to fight the war. They want to see us do it. One final thing I will say to that, because Susan, I know you're keeping track of time. When I was working at the Wounded Warrior Program, I told a group this past weekend, even families that have military people in the military and in the combat zones, they didn't foresee it as being real. I talked to many of families when their son or daughter was sitting there with no legs or arm crying. That's when they realized it was real. That's when they became peace lovers because they didn't want to see their other son or daughter go or their husband or wife to go. And so I think we start losing enough troops in Iran, unfortunately, John, I don't think we'll see a draft because I think that's when you'll see the everyday citizen out there on the streets. Because guess what? As one of our colleagues will say, General Leach, the author of No Skin in the Game, they will have skin in the game then because your son or daughter may be drafted and to go in and lose an arm, leg, or not come back alive. So I don't see us, my personal opinion, getting to a draft. They will use a backdoor draft first. And if we start losing too many in Iran, everybody will be on the streets then because they'll be fearful of their son and daughter being lost.
Thank you, Dennis. I would just like to add to that if we take a look at history and the protests that started out against the American involvement in Southeast Asia. What we learned is we couldn't keep boots on the ground because there was too much disturbance against it. So we went into an air war and then we went into a sea war. And today we're going more and more into artificial intelligence, and we are using that with drone warfare. And honestly, to me, that's the most frightening thing that's going on. When you have artificial intelligence identifying who the enemy is, targeting people, going after them, that's kind of the options that we see going on and all the discussions going on in Washington. And AI is everywhere, listening to everybody's conversation and making their plans. So we have lots, thank you, Dennis. We have lots to be concerned about. I'm not so sure we're going to be going to boots on the ground. What I do see are drones, and we do have protests going on with drones. And I would also say that the more successful our bulletin boards are in terms of active duty and National Guard and saying, do not obey illegal orders, there is much less likelihood of putting boots on the ground and of sending people into war. So we still have, I think, a lot to do and a lot that we can change and that we need to work on. And yes, hi, Ray McGovern. Did you want to add to that?
Can I be heard?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just want to compliment you all and Dennis for calling spades here. I see a shift now, almost a kind of sea change. The popularity of Netanyahu in this country, well, more people, like 60% disapprove of him, and 60% also disapprove of what Israel is doing. That's according to a Pew poll that's just 3 weeks old. So it's even before we decided to obliterate or we're going to eliminate a whole civilization. So now, one of the marks there not only is the Pew polling, but if you notice the New York Times, I don't ever buy it, but I read it. I did buy this one, okay? And if you can see this picture here, okay? And this is just exactly a week ago. And the title of the main article with that photo dominating above the whole fold on the first page, how Trump took us to war against Iran. The whole article says how Netanyahu took us to war against Iran, the whole thing. So somebody had a little cute title, and they decided, so maybe a lot of people don't recognize Netanyahu from the back. I had somebody say, "Who is that?" With Trump, you know. What I'm saying here is that when the New York Times goes top of the fold with a photo like this, even though it obfuscates the title, okay, although the piece is an incredible thing. It talks about exactly how Netanyahu took Trump to the cleaners on the 11th of February. Everything was deceitful about that. I was deceived. I thought Netanyahu didn't get it wanted, but he did. Now, the other thing I'll just say is that I think there's a moment where we, even in New York, my beloved town, can step forward and say, do you want your children to go to war for Netanyahu? I mean, that's very simple. Dennis said it. Iraq was due to Netanyahu. We know that now. Uh, Iran is due to Netanyahu. That's demonstrable. And this article proves it. Okay. So where are we? We're able, a Jewish Voice for Peace. My God, I'm a member of that. We got to join them. I mean, Irish Voice for Peace too, and Italians and Arab, everybody. We've got to kind of say, look, this is a teaching point. This is the moment. Because not only, in my view, is Trump not well, narcissistic to a fairly well, but I think that Netanyahu has a whole book with really spicy videos and photos of Trump with those underage girls, Epstein stuff. I think that's more likely than not right now, and helps to explain why, well, Biden supported genocide, so does Trump, but now he's supported war against Iran as well. So there's something that's got a hold of Trump, and it's Israel, okay? And if we can be that clear now and cite things like the New York Times story, Netanyahu comes, Mossad briefs with a kind of electronic way, and everybody says, oh, well, okay, let's go with it. And then these guys, his advisors, talk to Maggie Haberman and say, oh, we were against it. The next day, they don't say it to the president. Anyhow, I think it's a teaching moment here, and we ought to rise to the occasion. New York, well, it's the worst of places, and it's the best of places to do that. And if you do it, I'll come up and join you.
Come to the military recruiting station at Times Square, Ray.
I've been there, done that, but I'd love to
Still,
do
we
it
need a
again.
vigil there. We need a presence. We really do. I mean, what I think is so important, and I think what we're talking about today, is that military presence, that veteran presence that keeps saying, we've been there, done that, listen to us, hear us. And I'm just going to say, I am surprised that Tarek hasn't said this. When you go out and organize, look at Peace and Planet News. Hand it out. It is an educational piece of information. It gives you an opportunity to talk with people as you're handing the paper out and to explain we are veterans and this is what we are doing. And it gives them some education. So I just say I think it's all really important. And what I hear from everybody tonight is, yes, there are many factors that keep this war going. I have to say the thing that I just blows me away is that people continue to invest in the military-industrial complex and to put money into war, into death and destruction. And how on earth do they live with themselves? But they do that. So yes, Netanyahu and Trump, best buddies. The military-industrial complex, we need to educate people about where the enemies are. And I'm going to say again, for those of us in New York, I'd love to see us out in front of that military recruiting station with the big billboards and the banners that say, do not obey illegal, unlawful orders. And Dennis, if you can get folks to do that too, it's so important to say that to the military, and it's important to say to the American people, we have responsibilities as people who live in this country to stop what is going on. And that, I think, is important, and that's what is exemplified by the billboards. And we need to keep telling people, educating people, and have discussions wherever and whenever we can.
Amen.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful discussion. Dennis, you need to come up here and work with us too.
Well, I'll let you know when I'm, just for leisurely time, I like coming up to New York, and so I will let you know, in advance if y'all have something going on. And I always stay in Times Square, so it'll be convenient for me.
You got it. It's terrific. And to everybody on tonight, are there any other questions? You all are wonderful. Rachel, I'm sorry, is there anybody else that has something to say? It is after 8 o'clock. And I think, Dennis, you've been on with us. Thank you so much.
Let's have a big hand for Dennis, and thank you.
You got it.
Oh, you don't need to do that. But
yes.
But thanks for having me. My wife reminds me, sometimes, hey, Dennis, you get too passionate about this, but as I stated, I try hard, but it comes from the human side. These wars, I look at it from the human side of the house, and man, it's just nothing so much dear to me than human beings. One last thing I'm gonna say about this, I look at myself. I'm 69 years old. I don't want to die no time soon. But I look at we're killing innocent women and children won't get the chance to make it to where I am. And I look at the troops first, they won't make it. They're dying because of lies by our government. And so I can't help but being passionate. So, if I hit somebody the wrong way, I apologize, but it's me. Okay.
We love it. So thank you,
Dennis.
All right. I'm going to sign off now. I got to get something else. I appreciate y'all having me. Okay.
And thank you so much for coming.
We're going to share this.
Thank you.
Yes. Are we ready to go on to the New York City meeting?
Rachel, you can stop the recording now.